right now your brain is actively tricking you. It's basically making you believe that tomorrow will somehow magically be easier than today.
Oh, absolutely. It's a classic trick.
Right. I mean, it is a biological energy-saving mechanism. Psychologists know this incredibly well. Your mind just wants to conserve caloric and emotional energy, so it projects this, this frictionless future.
Yeah, a future where all the conditions for change are just perfectly aligned.
Exactly. But today, you shared a source with us that is designed to violently short-circuit that exact illusion.
It is entirely disruptive. I mean, what we were looking at today is essentially a micro-manifesto. It is just 4 sentences.
15 words in total.
Right, 15 words. But the psychological density of this text is what makes it so fascinating. It operates as a really precise, sequential framework for dismantling our deeply ingrained cognitive biases.
It's jarring, honestly, to think we're looking at just 15 words today, but they carry the weight of an entire behavioral philosophy.
Yeah, they really do.
So we are analyzing an excerpt from a piece titled "The Architecture of the Unstoppable Self." And the text simply reads, "Nobody is coming to save you. Start now. Bet of yourself. Become unstoppable."
It's just boom, boom, boom.
Right. So our mission for this deep dive is to really decode the mechanisms behind this framework. Because it's not just, motivational rhetoric. It's a blueprint.
Exactly. When you analyze the syntax and the underlying behavioral science, it becomes clear that this is a clinical approach to human resilience.
It demands action.
It demands the listener's active participation,
Yeah.
by confronting how we naturally process responsibility and action and identity.
Okay, let's unpack this by starting with the premise itself, which is hidden right in the title, "The Architecture of the Unstoppable Self."
The title does a lot of heavy lifting here.
It really does. Because before we even get to the 4 commands, the deliberate choice of the word architecture completely reframes how we think about identity. I mean, in structural engineering, architecture isn't about just throwing some wood together. It's about calculating load, stress, intent.
It's deliberate.
Right. Doesn't this immediately challenge the prevailing cultural narrative that we are just, born the way we are, or that we just need to find ourselves?
It absolutely does. And it does so by highlighting the fundamental difference between a passive existence and a constructed existence.
Wow. Okay.
What's fascinating here is how the concept of finding yourself treats identity like an archaeological dig.
Oh, that's a great way to put it.
Right. It implies your true self is this static pre-existing object buried under some dirt. And if you just travel enough or meditate enough, you'll uncover it.
Like brushing dust off a fossil.
Exactly. But architecture, on the other hand, implies that the plot of land is empty. The self is not discovered, it is designed, and it is built.
Which means you are dealing with structural integrity. If you are architecting a building, you have to pour a foundation that can actually support the weight of the roof.
You do.
You aren't just picking out paint colors for a house someone else handed you. You're pouring the concrete.
Precisely. And the modifier attached to this architecture is crucial. It is the architecture of the unstoppable self.
Right, not just a normal self.
Yeah. In engineering terms, you are designing a structure specifically engineered to withstand immense external force and friction. You are calculating for high winds and seismic activity.
You're building for impact.
You are building for impact.
But to build anything that resilient, you have to clear the site first. You have to remove the debris. Which, logically, leads us into the very first sentence of the text.
The hardest pill to swallow.
Yeah, it's a total psychological gut punch. Nobody is coming to save you. And I have to push back on this a little bit, because doesn't a statement like "nobody is coming to save you" border on, toxic individualism?
I can see why you'd say that.
What about community? What about people who legitimately face systemic barriers and actually do need external help or resources?
That is a very common and completely understandable reaction. But that is the trap of reading this as a sociological or political statement.
Okay, so how should we read it?
As an internal psychological tool, it is not an argument against community support or structural reform. It is a calculated disruption of what psychologists call an external locus of control.
An external locus of control, meaning you believe outside forces dictate your life.
Exactly. When you operate with an external locus of control, you unconsciously wait for a rescuer.
You're just sitting in the passenger seat.
Right. You believe that your success or failure is primarily determined by your boss or the economy, your partner, or just sheer luck.
So you give up your agency?
Over time, yeah, this breeds learned helplessness, a state where, because you've experienced stressors you couldn't control in the past, you literally stop trying to control the things you actually can.
Wow,
You passively accept discomfort because you're waiting for an external variable to change.
that makes a lot of sense. So this sentence isn't about isolating yourself from the world. It's about shifting to an internal locus of control.
It's an inward pivot.
Yeah, it's like taking the training wheels off a bike. It's terrifying for a second because you can fall, but it gives you total freedom to steer. It's forcing the realization that your internal cognitive state cannot be outsourced.
That's the mechanism perfectly described. The human brain is evolutionarily wired to conserve energy, as we said. Waiting to be saved is an incredibly efficient energy-saving mechanism.
Because you don't have to do anything.
Exactly. It allows us to remain passive while feeling like a solution is pending. We sit in this comfortable waiting room thinking, once I get that promotion, then I'll be happy.
Or, once the kids are older, then I'll focus on my health.
Yes. We basically create a phantom rescuer to justify our current lack of action.
And nobody is coming to save you. Violently demolishes that waiting room.
It tears it down.
It forces an internal activation. By removing the fantasy of an external rescue, it shifts you from a passive state of enduring circumstances to an active state of assuming total liability. You own the build site now.
You do, but that internal shift introduces a massive vulnerability.
How so?
Well, once you accept that the locus of control is entirely internal and you realize you have to be the one to act, you're left standing there with no momentum.
Ah, right. Which brings us to the author's logical next imperative. We need a timeline for this responsibility.
We do.
And the text answers with brutal brevity, start now. So what does this all mean for the builder? It's like standing on the edge of a cold pool. You can't stand there waiting for the water to miraculously warm up. You just have to jump.
That's a great analogy.
But why is now the only functional timeline for this architecture? Why not start tomorrow when you've had time to process it?
Because any timeline other than now reintroduces the exact external locus of control we just dismantled.
Oh, wow. I didn't think of it that way.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, human beings love to introduce friction through procrastination. But the neuroscience of procrastination is really what's at play here.
Okay, break that down for me.
When you plan to do something difficult tomorrow, your brain actually releases a mild hit of dopamine.
Wait, really? Just from the act of planning?
Yes. Your brain simulates the reward of having completed the task without requiring you to expend the caloric or emotional energy to actually do it.
That is wild.
Planning to diet tomorrow makes you feel good today. Planning to have that difficult conversation with your partner next week relieves the anxiety in the present moment.
So it's a trap.
It is. Waiting for the perfect moment is actually a highly sophisticated, disguised version of waiting to be saved.
That is incredibly subtle. So we think we are being responsible by waiting for the right conditions, but we're actually just biochemically tricking ourselves into staying stagnant.
Exactly. It's very similar to the concept of activation energy in chemistry. In order to start a chemical reaction, a specific minimum amount of energy is required.
Right, the spark.
If you have a match and a piece of wood, the wood will not spontaneously combust just because you stand there wishing the ambient temperature was higher.
The temperature is never going to magically ignite the wood.
The perfect moment of spontaneous combustion doesn't exist. Now represents the friction of striking the match. It is the deliberate application of activation energy.
So start now strips away the illusion that the future version of you will somehow possess more willpower than the present version of you.
Exactly.
It demands that you supply the activation energy immediately, because now is literally the only variable the architect ever controls.
Precisely. It overcomes the static friction of human behavior. Static friction moving an object from a complete standstill always requires more force than keeping an object in motion.
Just getting the boulder to roll at all.
Yes. By demanding immediate present tense action, the blueprint forces you to cross that initial painful threshold.
Which catapults us right into the core instruction of the entire text. We've accepted the liability, we've provided the activation energy to strike the match, and now we hit the physical labor. Build yourself.
The actual work.
Right. And here's where it gets really interesting, because this circles back to the architectural premise of the title, but the syntax is what really catches my attention.
The phrasing of it.
Yeah. It's a transitive command where you are simultaneously the subject and the object. You are the architect swinging the hammer, and you are the raw material being shaped.
The dual nature of that command is what makes the process so cognitively demanding. You are the sculptor and the marble.
Michelangelo in the stone.
Exactly. And from a neurological standpoint, building yourself is not a metaphor. It is a literal description of neuroplasticity.
Wow, okay. How does that work?
Every time you consciously choose a difficult action over a comfortable one, you are physically strengthening neural pathways. You are adding myelin to the synaptic connections that govern discipline and focus.
Let's ground this in reality, though. When someone hears build yourself, the temptation is to imagine like a Rocky montage.
Waking up at 4 a.m., drinking raw eggs.
Exactly. And suddenly being a completely new person by the end of the song.
But for an audience that is trying to navigate complex careers and relationships, what does this construction phase actually look like? Because a Rocky montage isn't sustainable architecture.
It's not. Real construction is iterative. It's tedious, and honestly, it's often deeply unglamorous.
It's messy.
Very messy.
Yeah.
For a highly functioning adult, building yourself rarely means a cinematic physical transformation. It usually looks like dismantling the cognitive dissonance of staying in a comfortable but stagnant career.
Having the hard conversations with yourself.
Exactly. It looks like the painstaking acquisition of a complex new technical skill when you already feel overwhelmed by your daily tasks. It means auditing your own emotional reactivity during a high-stakes meeting and choosing to reconstruct how you communicate.
So it's treating your behavioral responses as structural components that can be upgraded. Yes. And we cannot ignore the fact that building fundamentally requires demolition.
Oh, right. You have to tear down the old stuff.
You cannot build a high-rise on rotting wood. To build this unstoppable self, you might first have to ruthlessly tear out self-limiting beliefs or sever ties with environments that continuously reinforce your learned helplessness.
You have to clear the lot.
The blueprint requires you to act as a highly critical building inspector of your own life. If a habit or a relationship or a mindset isn't contributing to the structural integrity of the project, it must be dismantled.
Which is exhausting. I mean, demolishing old habits means enduring the psychological withdrawal of losing your familiar routines. It's incredibly uncomfortable.
It is the hardest part.
But according to the text, if you sustain that neuroplastic restructuring, if you relentlessly lay those new cognitive bricks, you reach the final imperative. The culmination of the entire process become unstoppable.
And this raises an important question regarding what that final state actually entails.
Right, because unstoppable sounds like a superhero movie.
Exactly. When we hear unstoppable, the cultural interpretation is often synonymous with invulnerability. The idea that if you build yourself properly, you will never fail, you will never feel overwhelmed, and you will never experience hardship.
Right, the idea of becoming this bulletproof robot where nothing goes wrong. But if that's the promise, it feels like a false one because nobody escapes friction.
Nobody escapes friction. The laws of physics, both literal and metaphorical, still apply to all of us. That is why we have to look at unstoppable through the lens of actual physics.
Okay, break out the physics textbook.
In physics, momentum is calculated as mass multiplied by velocity.
Okay, let's break that down. How does mass and velocity apply to the human psyche?
The mass is the density of the skills, the emotional regulation, and the resilience you have painstakingly constructed during the build-yourself phase. It is the heavy, solid, structural integrity of the self.
Okay, and the velocity?
The velocity is the continuous forward action generated by the command to start now. When you multiply that massive structural integrity by continuous forward action, you generate an immense amount of psychological momentum.
Oh, I see where this is going. It's the difference between a snowball rolling down a hill and a massive boulder.
Exactly.
So an object with massive momentum doesn't magically avoid hitting obstacles. It still hits the wall.
It absolutely still hits the wall. It still encounters immense friction, setbacks, and failures. But because of its sheer mass and velocity, the external obstacle simply does not possess enough counterforce to halt its forward progress.
It just crushes the obstacle.
It absorbs the impact and keeps moving.
So a failure isn't a stop sign. It just becomes a variable you calculate into the ongoing construction. You have accumulated so much kinetic energy that stopping is no longer the default physical response.
Precisely. To be unstoppable means your internal drive is no longer dependent on perfect external conditions. Think back to the very first sentence, nobody is coming to save you. By the time you reach the final sentence, become unstoppable, a profound psychological synthesis has occurred. You realize you no longer need an external rescue.
You're saving yourself.
You have engineered a psychological structure that generates its own activation energy. You are completely immune to the waiting room.
It's a closed-loop system of total self-reliance. I mean, from just 15 tiny words, we've unpacked the transition from learned helplessness to self-sustaining momentum. This is exactly why we do the deep dive.
It's a brilliant framework.
Let's trace the causality of this framework one more time to see how it all connects for the listener.
Sure. It begins with a violent disruption. You must shift your locus of control by accepting the stark reality that nobody is coming to save you.
Right.
Because you are now solely responsible, you are forced to supply your own activation energy and bypass the brain's deceptive planning loop. You must start now.
And once in motion, you become both the architect and the raw material, engaging in the grueling neuroplastic work of demolition and construction. You must build yourself. And as that density and forward action compound, you generate a momentum that absorbs external friction rather than being halted by it. You become unstoppable.
And for you, listening to this analysis, it is vital to recognize that this isn't just an abstract theoretical discussion.
No, not at all.
This text is a functional schematic for your own cognition. The building site is the exact life you are currently living. The variables, the locus of control, the activation energy, the daily construction, they are entirely within your jurisdiction. There is no external contractor coming to pour the foundation.
The structural integrity is entirely up to you. We promise to decode the mechanism behind these 15 words, but understanding the mechanism is only the theoretical part of the architecture.
The theory doesn't build the house.
Exactly. The application is where the actual building happens. So we want to leave you with one final lingering thought to explore on your own. If you are truly the architect of an unstoppable self, and the only biological timeline that bypasses the illusion of tomorrow is now, what is the exact cognitive brick you need to lay down, or the rotting habit you need to demolish, the very second this deep dive ends?